We are live. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Bigfoot and much, much more. In fact, we'll take your inquiries and your super chats, questions, anything like that. We're going to do a hangout with a scholar, an expert we're going to discuss. But first thing I want to just mention is that we have this really, really interesting figure we call Bigfoot. Some call Yeti. There are various names for these type of primates. And they're pretty good at hide and go seek. I would say not as good as God, but they're pretty good at hide and go seek. And so let me introduce our guest today, and let's enjoy this. I think this will be fun. So, Dr. Natalia Reagan, welcome to MythVision.
I have to correct you right there. I am not a doctor.
Okay.
But you can call me doctor if you want. My mom's Dr. Reagan. I have a master's, but
Got it. Okay.
Just not misrepresent.
Got it. I want to be accurate here. So just so everybody know, you are an anthropologist. I'm going to be reading the bio here just so people can understand. Anthropologist, primatologist, comedian, host, producer, podcaster, professor, writer, frequent animal expert, and monkey chasing weirdo. Your words.
Yes.
Not mine.
No.
Before becoming a scientist, she was a comedic actress, getting her SAG card whilst playing a dancing chicken McNugget in a McDonald's commercial. Natalia landed bit parts in The Drew Carey Show, Everybody Loves Raymond, My Name is Earl, and Sex Drive. After getting hit by her own truck on the shoulder of the 101 freeway, Natalia decided to go back too, and then it cuts off.
Oh, no. I went to school to become a biological anthropologist. Darn it. I guess that my bio was too big to put in the private chat.
Yes.
Too robust. But yeah,
Okay.
In my own words, if you want, I can finish it so you don't have to. I went back to school to become a biological anthropologist, and I actually studied the Azuero spider monkey in rural Panama. And then after grad school, I decided to make science comedy videos in my garage, which led to hosting, or actually the story of boobs, the breast tale ever told, landed me a spot on the Today Show to talk about tatas with Ann Curry. And then after I admitted on national television that I watched Skinamax as a child, they never asked me back. Shocking. And then in 2013, this is why I'm here. In 2013, I actually co-hosted a TV show called $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty. Say that 10 times fast with 1990s Superman Dean Cain. He was conservative then, but much more so now. So we didn't talk politics.
Right.
But then I went on to work with Neil deGrasse Tyson, writing comedy and hosting and being a correspondent on his podcast and TV shows. And, you know, you've probably seen me on a bunch of Nat Geos, a lot of science shows. I do a lot of science shows, talking head stuff. So
you're big on science and comedy, and people will pick that up. So she has a website. It's in the description. She also has a YouTube channel. We're coming back to this 2.24K. We're going to see how many subscribers we can get for you by the end of the live stream. We hope everybody gets that. I pinned it at the top of the comment section for everybody who's tuning in. She's also got an Instagram, and you can go follow her at that, as well as Twitter. So with that being said, Bigfoot is the real deal.
So he's the greatest hide and go seek champion in the world, like you mentioned. But as a scientist and a skeptic, I would say the probability of Bigfoot existing is, I can't say it's impossible, but it's directly adjacent to zero. And I'll go through some of the reasons why. And when I hosted the Bigfoot show, so I had just graduated from grad school in 2011, and it was 2013 that we did the show. And I was nervous because, you know, I didn't have much time to have any street cred. Hold on. I have a very loud snoring pug in the distance. So if you hear something,
hear it, but your mic might be filtering it out. And just so everybody knows, that's the original OG Bigfoot film, right?
Yeah. Right. But yeah, so I was scared to do this show because I was like, I don't want to lose all street cred before I even have any. But I saw this as an awesome opportunity because they were doing great science on the show. It was a reality competition show. 9 teams of 2 were going out. And this is the funny thing. It was called $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty. And it was Lloyd's of London that actually put up the money. And whoever could find photographic and DNA evidence, which, to be honest, photographic evidence doesn't mean crap, literally, because if you got the DNA evidence, that's kind of what you need. And by DNA evidence, what would you need to make it, what would make that a golden turd, quite literally, for the $10 million? And that is that it would be a non-human primate DNA that has not been sequenced before that would be in the great ape family. If you do believe, for instance, that Bigfoot is a great ape, because some of the Bigfoot squatchers, Yeti hunters had pretty interesting theories of what Bigfoot could be. Some thought they were, an interdimensional time traveling, creature that could go, back and forth between dimensions. And that's why we've never found any sort of Bigfoot scat or skeletons.
Can I just make a comment as you're going along with this? I find it interesting that some interpretations of Bigfoot, because there's scant to no evidence that's like, we have it, here it is. I see overlap with that and our perceptions of God. Now, I know that philosophy, you go way, way back, there's a development where God becomes less anthropomorphic and more abstract as an idea and out there somewhere. What better, I'll say, hypotheses than to say, well, my guy can actually teleport out of existence. It's the
my
best.
Favorite.
I'm sorry.
No, it's my favorite comeback, because you're like, I've got no rebuttal, because that is so far out there. I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we're not putting the words in their mouth. They're the ones who postulate these ideas because, well, we can't find them. Like, or we have these, like, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dark and big, or, these strange examples of people who think they saw or felt or whatever, or even maybe fabricate data, which I'm sure a lot of these are hoaxes.
Hoaxes, pokes. Yeah, a lot of hoaxes going on, but. And no, I mean, it's a great comparison. So I would never call myself an atheist. I would always say I'm an agnostic, because I don't know. I don't know. And so while I don't know about a lot of things, I can't claim to know. So I would rather just say, I don't know, but that doesn't mean there's belief there. And so with Bigfoot, I think there's a very romantic, lovely notion that there's this large bipedal hominin walking in the world that we can't find. And I understand wanting to believe this. I also don't want to discredit or to sort of dismiss indigenous knowledge or those that have tales about, a Yeti or a Sasquatch or a skunk ape. I know a friend of mine is Comanche, and they call them moopeets. Which is their version of, say, a Bigfoot. And, I'm not here to be like, yuck someone's yum. If that is what going squatching on the weekend with your son, your daughter, your buds, and drinking beers by the river is what you want to do, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, don't, do what you want. I'm not here to yuck your yum. If you're going to come with, and say that you want to discover a new species of non-human primate, my response is, this is an excellent opportunity to teach about primatology and to learn about it, right? Like, if you actually want to discover a new species of primate and you're open, just like I was always open to hear their theories, because some of them were really interesting. And I was like, okay. And it's whether it's more of a fiction thing, or more, rooted in fact, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about having that sort of dialogue, and we can learn from each other, right? Because, like, for instance, on Bigfoot Bounty, we had, I'm not a hunter. I'm not an animal tracker that way. I'm an animal tracker as in I studied spider monkeys, and I knew what to look for them. But, like, I would learn things from the actual animal hunting trackers as they were learning weird primate evolution from me, right? So it gave me an opportunity, and I've done a talk, if you're familiar with TAM, the meeting that James Randi, Amazing Randy. Yeah. So Amazing Randy used to have he was truly amazing. One of the nicest men I've ever met, and one of the kindest souls, but also, a fierce advocate for skepticism and reason. So, he's got my love. But I was honored and to be invited to speak at TAM 13 in 2015. And I opened the conference, and, a lot of people told me to my face, we thought it was going to suck. We did not know why you were here, because they thought I was going to kind of be fluffy and like, I'm blonde and I'm going to talk about Bigfoot. And I was like, no, it was Primatology 101. I was like, okay, if you want to talk about Bigfoot, let's go through all the different things we talk about, diet, their claws versus nails, their locomotion, their vocalization, their reproduction. How are they meeting each other? How are they stooping? Is it just one dude? That's weird. But like, we go through all of that, and it was kind of a primatology lesson. So it was a lot of fun, and that was kind of what the show was for me. Was an opportunity to talk about science that a lot of people would never get. Hominin evolution, talking about Miocene apes like Gigantopithecus, who's often thought to be the ancestor of Bigfoot, So it was really, really, really cool to have that opportunity. And we had a mobile DNA lab, which was really awesome at that point in time.
I'm just showing love to the audience. It's interesting. Some of the things you're saying here, are great questions to ask. Like, how are they mating, and how many are there? And like, there's all these questions that we haven't even established for sure to begin with. But I did want to ask you something, and this might rabbit trail us. So you're driving the train. Put us back on the tracks whenever you feel like we're getting a little too far off. But in your estimation, based on your research and engagement with Bigfootians, we'll call them Yetis, and the various tribesmen, whatever you want to categorize the whole thing. And what do you, as someone who's science-minded, a primatologist, anthropologist, like going at this from a scientific angle, what do you think is the basis behind? Do you think it's a misperception, or do you think this goes back to a time kind of like I've heard? Sorry, this sounds a little discombobulated, but I'll give you an example. One psychologist, I think it was, he's an evolutionary scholar that I've interviewed, said that the reason kids are often scared of monsters under the bed is that this is wired into us from millions of years ago, living in the canopies of the trees. All of our monsters truly were under our beds for millions of years. So it's neurologically, psychologically wired into our DNA at this point to have some sort of perception or subconscious reality that there's something under our bed or in the dark closet over there, because nocturnal creatures for millions of years ate our ancestors, our families, our loved ones, etc. And so I'm wondering if there's some psychological thing in your estimation as to why they think massive ass giant primates, yet they may have existed at some point in the past, and yet we're still carrying the superstition, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the thing about something being under your bed, one of the things I think to point out, for instance, is it's not even just under our bed, it's above us too, because if there's actually a guenins, which are there's many species of guenin, type of monkey that in the canopy, they live in different parts of the canopy, and they have different calls for raptors that are coming from above and those coming from below, like snakes and not jaguars in this case, but leopards, because this would be in Africa, not in South America. But they basically would have different calls for these type of predators. So we've been getting it from up top and below for a while, right? But I think, and it's not just things at night too. Like, that's the other thing. There's a lot of diurnal predators out there that, diurnal meaning those that are active during the day, that, one of the theories of why we walk on two legs is for predator avoidance, to be able to see above the savanna grass, or, get up high so we have a good vantage point. There's many theories of why we walk on two legs, and there could be multiple factors at play. But just that's a good point in terms of things like the boogeyman or something under your bed. These stories, these sort of tales that we tell the youth, are also ways to keep them in line, to keep them behaving well, right? You better brush your teeth, or the boogeyman's going to get you, or this is going to get you, right? Even magic and things like that, you better do this, or I'm going to put a spell on you, or, all these types of sort of rules and regulations. Religion is the same. When you put certain rules on people, you're controlling them. It's a control mechanism, especially if we're going to look at, religion and modern day, like with women and reproductive rights and things of that sort. Definitely it's less about sanctity of life and more about controlling a population of 51% of the population. But with Bigfoot, I do think that that's the thing we have to consider, is that it's not all bad, right? Some people think Bigfoot is a benevolent creature that is not out to get you. It's not a bad thing. It's it's actually just a creature that wants to survive and not be found, right? So that's one of the things that we look at, is when we talk to different people, what their theories are, because that's the crazy thing. There's just like all the whole spectrum of, he eats, people upon first sight, and then there's like, oh no, he's a chill dude that just wants to thrive in the forest, So, right. And there's different indigenous tales around the world, not just here in, the Pacific Northwest or in the Midwest, because the last episode of Bigfoot Bounty, they actually shot in UP, Upper Peninsula, Michigan, right? So it's not just the Pacific Northwest, and the Squatchers that actually won Bigfoot Bounty, because by the way, spoiler alert, we didn't find the big guy, but the two last, men standing were two Squatchers from Florida, where they have the skunk ape. So there's different ideas of what Bigfoot could be. Why they want to, well, I think there's a few different things to look at why there are these stories and tales, and why do they persist, but also what are they possibly seeing, that misconception that, and one example is bipedal bears. If you Google bipedal black bears, black bears love to get up on two legs and walk around. There's one here, unfortunately, I think it got killed in California, that would just walk around the neighborhood, just all willy-nilly, and that can be, misconstrued as, if it's super tall, 8 foot tall, like, and you see that through the trees, and maybe you had 1 or 2 Pabst Blue Ribbons, you don't know. Another thing I remember when we shot it, a team thought they saw something, and it ended up being 2 cows doing the nasty, just bovine lovemaking. So again, there could be, hearing things and seeing things, and just kind of making that big leap.
So I guess the question I have is, and people commented a few interesting things along the way, like Krampus or various beast type creatures. What's driving in your estimation, like, what do you think's driving it? Various factors? There's various things. Like, it's a long-standing idea. It seems that.
Well, Krampus, like, again, it's like these things that kind of keep kids in line. You know what I mean? Like Krampus, it's like a scary tale that, like, oh, Krampus is going to get you, and also we're humans are storytellers.
Yeah.
We like the dark, we like the light. We like to look at, good versus evil, and I think with something like, say, like a more of a malevolent figure like Krampus, you don't ever really see them in like the positive light. So, I think that right there is kind of a spooky story or a scary story to keep kids in line. Like I've done a lot of paranormal shows, like was it Paranormal Caught on Camera? I've never watched an episode, but I get, like, my aunt will be like, I just saw you on it, and I'm like, oh no, because I think they tried me to make me look like a believer, and I was like, because they brought me on to talk Bigfoot, and then in the end they would just keep me on because I was always good at riffing, so they'd show me clips of ghosts, doing really boring crap, and I'm like, these are the most boring ghosts I've ever seen, you know what I mean? And they would take it as if but anyways, they would have Slender Man, the Rake, all these different terrifying, paranormal creatures out there. And again, it's I think those sort of tales, we sort of cling to them. It's kind of part of our human existence, is creating these sort of stories, these narratives. If it was just happy stories all the time, I mean, I think we'd be bored out of our tears. So I think, to get the psychology of it. And also there's a very, like I said, it's romantic. Like I actually wrote, so I hosted that Bigfoot show. And I remember thinking to myself I didn't have a TV at the time when it aired. And so I actually had to live stream it based on tweet it based on other people's tweets. So I've never even really fully seen every episode, right?
Wow.
But the ones that I saw, I was like, oh man, I wish they just gave me the footage so we could have Reno 911'd it, because it was so funny. Like every episode, they'd have to bring biomaterials for proof of finding Bigfoot. And by biomaterials, I mean, it was a literal shit show.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
It was called the elimination round, without irony. Like it was like literally like turd after turd. My favorite was that one team kept bringing in moss and saying it was hair. Like, and I was like, no, I think I said no moss, because it, and I explained the branching off of the moss. This is not hair. But yeah, again, it was fascinating because we got to sequence all the turds. One team, this was really cool. They brought in feathers and were able to spin the feathers to determine that it had felid DNA on it, meaning that a cat had eaten whatever bird that was. We also had one where they had to capture biting blood-sucking insects, so like carrion flies, leeches, mosquitoes, and then you can dissect their abdomen and get blood from their most recent meal and you can kind of do an ecological survey without even seeing the animal. So one of the leeches came back with equine DNA, so it just sucked on a horse, right? It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, but this was funny. We did have to tell the contestants, I think they took DNA samples of everyone, and they were like, do not bring us your own crap. We will find out, because they had, they knew everybody's, DNA. They're like, do not, because they'd get desperate. It was like by the end of the show, they're like, here's another turn.
Oh my gosh. And so this is like, they're really competing, even if they have to fabricate or do just to find, they're trying to win no matter what, it seems.
Yeah, because and what we had to do, and this was like, it was such a funny show, because again, like, this is I'd done lots of TV before this as an actress, but never as a host of a reality show. This was wild to me. I was like, what am I doing? This is, and the thing is also, I realized very early on, and I'm not trying to throw the network or anyone under the bus. It's just these shows have so many egos attached to them higher up that are constantly throwing like conflicting notes at you, because if they don't have a note, then their job is not applicable anymore. So one day I'd get a note like, be funnier. Then I'd be like, you're too silly, too glib. You need to be more serious. No, that's too serious. Kind of, like, it was every day I was like, I'm going to go crazy. I don't know what you want. But I also think they didn't know what they wanted. Right. And so in the end, and this was really interesting. At the end, I got called. I was doing, I went straight from shooting the show to teach primate field school. So I went straight from Pacific Northwest, got on a plane to go to Costa Rica, was a TA for a primate field school. So I was teaching students how to put together research projects and chase monkeys. And then I had to go to Panama to present at a conference. And I was in Panama, and I got a call from the producer, who's a friend of mine. And he's just doing his job, but he's like, hey, Natalia, I need you to come back so we can do some reshoots. And he's like, have you ever seen the X-Files? And I said, of course, and he goes, well, we need Todd to be more Scully and we need you to be more Mulder. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm not playing Dr. Meriwether Chambers, I'm Natalia Reagan. I can't fake that I believe this, Right. So I had to put my foot, and it was the first time, like, and I was, kind of new at the game of hosting a show, and I had to kind of put my foot down and be like, I can't be a believer, I'll lose all credibility.
Yeah, you would.
So,
I actually had an offer. I never mentioned it to the channel because I'd rather see it happen than try to mention, but there's a channel, or there's a potential documentary at some point in the future where they wanted a skeptic and they wanted a believer. And what the whole thing was about is the ancient civilization arguments that you hear people say, like, hey, Egyptologists say these pyramids were built 2500 BCE in the 19th dynasty, this, that. And they actually say they're trying to like uprule any consensus on the archaeological data, on the Egyptologist claims, all these things. Look at these stones. How did they get these perfect things without a modern technology? All of this, like, how did they build the pyramids? And so they wanted someone like me to be skeptical, but they were saying, kind of hinting at, like, up front, hey, during this show, we're hoping that we convert you, kind of like, we want you to do that. And I'm like, look, I'm going to be skeptical. I'm not an expert in this area, and I would defer to the scholars. It kind of like was really weird to me, because I have family that's big into I'll use the term conspiracy theories because they're big into these. And when they talk about, we don't know exactly how the pyramids are built, I'm like, actually, I know we don't know exactly how they built them, but we have actual documentation from pharaohs, like actual receipts of them getting the rocks from the quarry and making the pyramids.
Yeah.
How exactly they did so, I don't know. But like, why are we ignoring that and pretending that humans at that time did not build them? Like, do you think they fabricated this information? What would be like, how far do you want to go in being that way? And so anyway, I've never been on a show, but they've offered that. And I'm like, as long as they would tell me, even if you aren't persuaded, you're welcome to be part of it, maybe I'll join. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's tough. So I've done a lot of things about ancient aliens and talked about this sort of idea of if it wasn't if it wasn't a white European nation that built this monumental architecture, it
Right.
must have been aliens.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And that's a lot of archaeologists would argue they do know a lot about how this happened. It took time because that's how advanced they were. But even recently, I was just talking to a woman I met at a wedding this weekend who also studied archaeology. Like, so I studied my background is in four-field anthropology, so I had a decent archaeology training, but that's not my specialty. My specialty is biological anthropology. But she was more of an archaeologist, and that was her focus. And we were just talking about different settlements in Guatemala and, on the sort of Pacific side, actually when that was both sides of the Pacific and the Caribbean side, and just different settlements of Mayan towns that had very, complex ways of alerting sailors that they were about to approach land, much like a lighthouse would. Or like recently, I need to look this up because I just saw it a couple of days ago. I'm going to Ecuador next month, and they just unearthed a new town, a big city in Ecuador, that rivals Teotihuacan in Mexico City. So again, like there's a lot of progress made very early on, and a lot of innovation made very early on. Like we talk about Machu Picchu and different like pyramids in South America that were done, way before a lot of monumental architecture was done in Western Europe. But a lot of times that's dismissed as we don't know how they did it, or, that seemed, we got to find some sort of paranormal reason for why this happened. Even Easter Island with the Moai or Rapa Nui, they have determined how they were able to move them. And it's wild. I don't know if you've ever seen them walking. Like it was kind of like experimental archaeology, or, trying to recreate how they would have done it, but they actually walk the Moai, those giant stone faces, right? And they're able to do it. It's very tough. It's not easy, but they were able to do it. And so again, I think we have to question why it's always those civilizations that were sort of foisting that alien narrative on.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, what's the underlying thing? I like this one by DJ Franks is, if they had some super technology, why did they only use it to stack rocks? I mean, specifically the pyramids, of course, in like Egypt and whatnot, but all over the world, really. Like, what's going on here? Derailed us off of Bigfoot, but I wanted
yeah. I'm trying to think. There was one thing I was going to say about Bigfoot, and I got a little.
If you will, I don't want to throw you off.
No. And I was going to say, I don't know if anyone's brought up Patterson.
Probably not.
Patterson Gimlin film, because I was going to say, like, I've taken down the Patterson Gimlin film. I don't need to, because it's already been confirmed. They've already admitted it was a hoax. That is the very famous one in Bluff Creek, California. We went there during Bigfoot Bounty and shot at Bluff Creek, which was wild, right? And that whole town, it's called Willow Creek, is so cool because everything is Bigfoot themed. Everything is like, and we stayed there. I think we were there for 4 days. 5 days maybe. And so I'm a runner. So I'd start every day, like, running by all this. There's just statues of Bigfoot all throughout town. It was really kind of neat. But that Patterson Gimlin film, it's supposed to be a female Sasquatch walking into this clearing. And I always point out, and people get kind of like, why is she talking about her boobs? But she's supposed to be
the one that I showed the picture of. This one?
Yeah. I think did you?
Yeah, I think this is it. Patterson. Yeah.
Yeah. She's got, she's got some impressive rack, I'll say, but they're super high, they're covered in fur, and they don't move. There a lot of non-human primates so humans are unique, and we're the only animal in the animal kingdom that gets real boobs, as in fat surrounding the mammary gland. Like all mammals, we lactate, right? All of us do. So we lactate, and non-human, like our closest genetic relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, lactate, but they don't have permanent titties, right? They lactate when they're nursing, and then they go back down. They might be saggy, but they're not filled and plump, right? We get them at puberty, and they stick around. right? And they're also, before the advent of bras and things of that sort, they're a great indicator of age, especially if you've got big whammies, right? Because gravity takes hold. And so this Bigfoot image, she has a pretty substantial, sweater cows, and they are sweater cows because they're draped in fur, and a lot of non-human primates that, they don't have fur on their boobs. They're actually clear of that. And they move, right? Like boobs move, especially if they're that big. And they also are just, I mean, I made a joke. I was like, who's her doctor? Because I'd love to meet her or him, because they're like super high and tight, and these are things to look at. I know it sounds silly, but like, if you're a woman looking at a film that's supposed to be a female Sasquatch, it's like, in what world? Right. But that has already been cleared as a hoax. And there's been tons of other ones, like footprints are another good one. It's easy. They talk about the mid-tarsal break. It's easy to fake that. And it's, at this point, I always say, like, hey, if you found footprints and they legitimately think they're footprints, right? Why don't you look around the footprint? Because obviously if that was a Bigfoot and they were there, let's look and see if they left any biomaterials nearby. And biomaterials don't necessarily have to be poop, but it could be like, did they eat a piece of fruit or some leaves and left saliva on it? That's a way you can get, basically, it's called eDNA, environmental DNA. You could also look for hair. And by the way, for instance, if you do find maybe like a piece of hair or, like a strand of hair, what you really want is the follicle. That is the best part to get viable DNA, So These are things that you can look for. They can be clues because I'm not here to yuck anyone's yum. If you're like, I definitely want to go squatching, I'm not giving up the hunt. I'm like, okay, cool. Look for other little signs that might give you more definitive answer. But yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that I did, because I love this idea of Bigfoot, and I've always, like, Labyrinth was one of my favorite movies growing up, right? I love Labyrinth. I love this idea of this world of mythical cryptid creatures. I think it's so romantic and beautiful. I think it's such a great, I don't know. And in my mind now, what I think is magic, and when I walk out my door, or you don't even have to walk out my door, I can hear the hooting of the owls. I hear the weird chatter of my ravens. You know what I mean? That to me is like my own little magical, mythical creatures, even though they're very much real. Like, there's so much, I don't know, cool stuff in nature. But I wrote a pilot based on that show that I did called Diddly Squatch. And it's basically, it's really fun. It had a lot of interest in 2021 and the plague. So I'm actually rewriting it right now and hoping to get it back out there, because I do think it's a lot of fun. But it's the idea of like actually discovering, a real Bigfoot, and what would that look like? And what would that be like for somebody who didn't believe to all of a sudden have to be forced into believing and hide it?
I'd like to ask the question I asked in our previous discussion, which isn't edited yet, which will come out.
Oh, no.
And that is, what if someone like me, who's extremely skeptical, is not a science mind like you, who knows the anthropology, the fossil record inside out, or at least very well, said, okay, hold on, I don't think this mythical creature exists. I think that there are fanciful stories, but there's a basis to the reality that maybe some form of hominid exists that survived. What are your arguments in saying, I don't buy it, and here's why I don't think this Bigfoot is actually a hominid that survived and just somehow hide and seek at this point?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like looking at population viability analysis, for a hominin to go undetected for that long, and also sustain a population for thousands of years, like thousands of years, is really unlikely, right? I mean, because like even our own species went through a bottlenecking like 70,000 years ago and almost went extinct because our numbers dropped so much. So usually, like when we look at other animals, we do things like it's called a population viability analysis. How many individuals do we need for a thriving population to last into several generations? Because we have to take into account inbreeding depression, right? So like, who the heck is Bigfoot getting down with? You know, how big is this population? Okay, here, let me just paint the picture, you know, like are there different groups? And this is like, I ask questions like I would ask about any species, right? Like if it was a species of geckos, it's like, are there different groups? And they like have like, for instance, with chimpanzees and bonobos, they're called patrilocal, meaning the males stay in the group, the females disperse. In baboons, a lot of times it's the males that disperse, the females stay. So like, you know, how does that work? And where do they go? How do they meet somebody? How do they make sure they're not like distant cousins? And if so, are they experiencing their own problem with like inbreeding problems? Right. So, you know, that right there is a a big factor. Like, how are they getting down and how are they going undetected, especially if it's such a big animal? You need a lot of food to feed that animal. Where are they getting it? That's a big question I ask squatchers. What does Bigfoot eat?
Right.
You know, and a lot of times they're like, well, they or whatever they want to say, they love big game animal and this and that, you know, and I'm like, how are they catching them? Do they have a tool industry? You know, because well, no, but like, you know, Neanderthals had Mousterian, Homo sapiens, you know, the early, like, well, first, like early, you know, now that I think Proanthropus boisei, I used Oldowan tools, but first it was Homo habilis. Did they have a tool industry that we can find, you know? How are they felling these big game animals? You know, some are like, oh, they're jumping on trees and jumping out of trees and jumping on them and like clawing at them with their claws. I'm like, all primates have nails, not claws. The only primate that has claw-like nails are callitrichids, and that's because they're very small and live in trees that have to scramble up. So like I kind of would like catch them and little thing, and I'm not trying to be like, it's just more like take this information and see what you can work with it. And also like you should have the full, and this is why I think if you want to find Bigfoot, you got to think like a primatologist. You have to think like a scientist. My comparison with the Tam talk was like, if you want to go back to the future, you need to become a physicist. You need to get a DeLorean. You need to make friends with Doc Brown. You got to get a plutonium from a bunch of Libyans, you know. I mean, that was my Back to the Future joke, but like you really have to think like a scientist, like a primatologist. But so yeah, I do, again, I think it's highly romantic that like Homo erectus, you know, but although Homo erectus probably wasn't swathed in fur and they were not that tall. They were tall. Homo erectus was quite tall, but not that tall. There has been theories that it was Gigantopithecus. Now, Gigantopithecus used to have 3 species in the genus, but Gigantopithecus is the genus. Gigantopithecus blacki is the name of the species, and it has been determined that they're basically the great grandfather of orangutans. They're, you know, related to them, and so we have very little remains of Gigantopithecus. We have no postcranial. So we only have a lower jaw. Okay. So we have got, you know, the mandible, and we've got some teeth that are huge. They're giant, hence Gigantopithecus. Huge, giant molars. Huge. But no postcranial remains. And so we're basing a lot of this on minimal evidence, like actual cranial evidence. And most likely, you know, Gigantopithecus, if it was as tall as they say, like 7-8 foot tall, but would have been a quadruped, would not have been walking on 2 legs. And there's certain ways that you can determine whether a hominin walked on 2 legs or not. We have not. One of them is through. It's called the foramen magnum. So like here you go. Yeah. There's a Homo. This is Lake Turkana or Nariokotomi, Homo ergaster. This was a young male that died around 12 years of age. They projected he would have been about 6 foot tall, quite tall. But this is the way you determine, one of the ways to determine if something was bipedal or not, was the positioning of the foramen magnum, which is the hole where the spinal cord goes into at the base of the skull. The more anterior positioned it is, closer to the front of the skull, the more likely it was a biped. If it was a quadruped, it would have been positioned further back. So that's a way that you can determine. You also look at the femur. I don't have a femur with me. This is why I miss working in a lab. I need to 3D print a femur. With the femur, you can look at the femoral neck. So, you know, when you have a femur, you have that neck with the knob at the end. The longer the neck and the way that the femur is angled, that also is a way you can tell if something was bipedal. You can look at the calcaneus, or the heel bone of, like, so, you know, when you walk on 2 feet, you're putting a lot of pressure on that calcaneus, that heel. We have a very thick calcaneus compared to other non-human primates that walk on all 4s. So these are the things that you look at. But unfortunately, with Gigantopithecus, we have very minimal remains. But I think, again, this is what I love Bigfoot. How often do I get to talk about Miocene apes on a live stream, right? But I still think it's fascinating, and I want people to know, like, these are the ways you can determine something walked on two legs. This is how you determine if it's an ancestor or not. Talking about weird hominin tool industries. It's rad.
I was actually pretty blown away by living up here in Washington to see so many stickers. Usually they're on the back of trucks.
Yes.
Yeah, there's like these Sasquatch stickers, like they really believe. It's almost like a Christian putting a cross or a fish on the back of their car.
Again, I don't hate it. I freaking love it. Hold on. I'm also going to show you. This is one of my favorite. I have a bunch of Bigfoot stuff, as you can imagine. Here's one of my Bigfoot pendants. I've got a couple of these. Again, if you're going to believe in something, I'll take Bigfoot. Although sometimes I get a lot of squatchers that follow me, and not always, but sometimes they're very conservative and they don't like my worldview, and that's fine. That's fine. We don't, but sometimes they'll follow me for like 2 minutes, and then they'll be like, "Whoa, who is this liberal lady?"
Right.
Yeah, and that's fine. We don't. Hey, we don't always have to agree on things, but yeah, I think it's pretty amazing that there's so many people that want to, and even I think a lot of people, unlike the Jesus fish, I think people put Bigfoot on their car, even if they don't necessarily fully believe.
Right.
There's that pop culture aspect of Bigfoot. There's the Harry and the Hendersons.
You could say the same thing about the fish and the cross too. Like a lot of Christians are cultural Christians. They say, and then they're at the club on Saturday doing their thing, or they live however they want, but they're Christian. So I imagine there's some overlap in terms of the degree at which they take serious their beliefs. And I think this rolls into a belief category. I mean, look, I grew up running the woods, running the creeks, fishing the ponds, shooting squirrels and things like that when I was younger with my BB gun. Had a little BB gun. Like I know the exploration and the enjoyment of this big world of like, there's a turtle in the water right there. And then what is that over there? And like hunting and doing that kind of stuff. There's something cool about that. At the same time, I now enjoy going, well, is this true? And what are we doing? And how does this impact us? So I'd like to ask you one more, and then anyone who has questions can ask, or if you have somewhere you want to take this, and that is, have you ever had someone hostile because you're not convinced? If anything, the evidence you're presenting is critical of there being an actual Bigfoot. Have you ever had anyone threaten you, or any crazy stuff, crazy emails?
Not crazy. I've just been kind of insulted, like Bobo from Finding Bigfoot? Yeah, Bobo from Finding Bigfoot, which is like the big Bigfoot show, right? Like we were like a small little itty bitty Bigfoot show, had one season, disappeared. Bobo is like a host on the bigger one. He called me like when I did the video about taking down the Patterson Gimlin film, and just how like you can like look at it piece by piece and determine it was not real.
Mm-hmm.
He called me like a dumb blonde ditz or something like that, which, whatever, but nobody really has been mean. Cause I think what's interesting, and like, I think I love the comparison of belief and faith in God and Bigfoot.
Right.
I really love that. I think I'm really happy that we're talking about that. Cause I do think there's some similarities. Like there's a bit of a blind faith,
right.
Like for instance, like seeing God in a piece of toast. Like we see Bigfoot as a bear, bipedal bear walking in the woods. We can interpret a lot of things to fit our narrative. There's a lot of confirmation bias out there. So that I think is really interesting. But I haven't had too much on the show. I know that some people didn't like me. But that's fine. I mean, not everyone's going to like you, right? Like, especially if I'm the skeptic, And I also wasn't like my co-host, Todd, who's one of my best friends. Like, I absolutely adore him. But he was like, I took this show so seriously. I didn't like really drink. I don't drink now, but like, I barely like drink or party. Cause he would like hang with the contestants, like not in an you know, like it wasn't not cool. We could all hang with each other. It wasn't like we were like sequestered, but you know, I wasn't trying to be everyone's best friend. I was trying to do a good job. Like this was like my first, you know, and he, even though it was his first show too, he was a full professor at a university. I wasn't. I think, you know, I'm a science communicator through and through. That's what I do. I've taught along the way, but like majority of my money has come from science communication. At some points it was teaching, but not then. And so I took it really, really seriously. And I think that, you know, so I didn't have that sort of buffer if they really loved me, you know, even though like I'm still friends with a lot of them on social media and stuff. And we'll still have kind of like these nice conversations. There's some that really didn't like the fact that I, you know, but we had, I don't know, there were some really great conversations and things that I didn't even know. Like, and this is a great example of why, if you knew your monkeys and apes, like Coyote Peterson, for instance, I didn't even really know who he is, but he's like one of those people that like gets bit and stung for fun, or like he's like one of those adventure types, like a more sensational Bear Grylls, I think. And please correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, because I don't know for sure. But he came out in 2022 saying that he found, oh yeah, he was in the Pacific Northwest, and he was like, I found a new species of primate in the mud. And it's like this picture of this skull coming out of the mud. And I was like, that is a Western lowland gorilla skull. Like it's just, and wait, no, do I have one behind me? No, I think it's on another shelf. But anyways, sorry. I'm like,
you're fine.
My skulls are just, they're all over the place. But yeah, a Western lowland, and it's a miniature one. Western lowland gorilla skulls are just, they're intense. When you look at that, you're just like, what? You're like, damn. It has a huge sagittal crest, which there's sexual dimorphism in gorillas, meaning there's big size differences. Well, sexual dimorphism is just differences between sexes within a species. And in gorillas, specifically, it's size. You know, you got a 400-pound male gorilla and 250-pound female. But the males have this very pronounced, it almost looks like a conquistador helmet, like this pronounced ridge, like this. Hold on, where are you? Oh no, this has a more pronounced one. This is not a gorilla skull, but this is Paranthropus ethiopicus, and I know it's black, so it's hard to see, but here you can kind of see that ridge right there. Gorillas, male gorillas have that sort of ridge. See how it looks like this like really cool mohawk, but a bony mohawk. And that right there is usually, it's indicative of having a really strong bite force, because those the muscles, temporalis muscles will come up and attach at the top here. They'll go through this particular species has very big cheekbones, and it'll come up through and attach. But anyways, I took one look at that skull that Coyote Peterson was like, look at this. And friends of mine sent it to me. Brian Dunning, if you're familiar with Brian Dunning of Skeptoid, good friend of mine, reached out to me and was like, hey, Natalia, check this out. And I was like, God damn it. Now I have to make a video. And I did. I took it down. Or like I took down this sort of like idea that he didn't say it was Bigfoot, but that's what he was alluding to. And a lot of his fans attacked me, and it was not like, it wasn't trying to be mean. What I was trying to say was he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. And also what was frustrating too, and gave me an opportunity to talk about this, is trafficking of gorilla body parts is a thing. Like you can buy, gorilla hands and skulls on underground markets, all around the world, but also specifically in Africa, of course, where they come from. But it's like, you don't want to send out the message that like, I would like to know that he got the skull, like the skull is a cast, right? Like, I hope it's a bone clone skull, not something he bought, because that sends the wrong message to people that might be watching. But also like, if you're an educator, you don't need to hoax to educate, you could do a quick, like, haha, I just got you. Like, this is actually this, right? And that would have been kind of I think a cooler way of going about, instead of faking this Bigfoot thing. But then one of the contestants on the show, actually on Bigfoot Bounty, showed me a picture, and he's like, this is called Deloy's ape, and it was from the late 1890 or maybe 1890s, early, like turn of the century, turn of the 20th. And essentially it's this primate being kind of propped up. And I took one look at it and I was like, that's a spider monkey propped up with a stick, because I do what I do, there was no question. It was like, it's like, if you were a plumber and you saw a certain type of leak, you would look at it and be like, of course that's what that is. Like you are a sailor and you look at a knot, and that's the, whatever the square flip knot, and so again, that's why I think treating this like you're doing a science is the best way to do.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, the person that knows that they're making up the data to make it Bigfoot, it makes me want to know the psychology of some of these people. Like, do they know this is all hoax and this is their paycheck? Or is there some combination? They really believe, but they have to insist in fabricating data in order to convince themselves and others. Because I know that when I was an apologist for Christianity, like I would find arguments to try and prove my belief system. So you are looking for ways to confirm your already presupposed belief. And so whatever cost, some people are willing to go beyond like sincere, accurate data to try and do it. They'll fabricate or go beyond the argument or make up stuff along the way to push that. So it's not that they don't believe, it's that they're willing to lie to make their belief even truer. That makes sense.
And that's the thing about science. Like, for instance, if someone came to me, or if it got published, if we discovered an actual Bigfoot, like for real, science, in theory, scientists would be like, okay, that exists now.
Right.
Like we would, because that's the thing. Science, unlike religion, unlike things that are, faith-based, science is meant to change. It's not static. It's not fixed. As we gather more data, we change our theories. That is how it works, right? And that's actually one of the biggest, I think, complaints I have about science messaging. And it's not that the people that doing the science messaging are bad at it. It's just one of the things that has been missed, I think, in science education across the board here in the US is that message. Because during COVID, I think that's what drove so many people crazy. And I can understand if you don't have that knowledge that science is meant to constantly change, right? Like, my best friend is an ER pediatrician. She's I just talked to her this morning. She's on a Doctors Without Borders mission in Chad. She's a badass, but she's an ER pediatrician. We were in New York City when COVID broke out. Every day there was something new. Every day she's like, we're seeing this like weird inflammation with these kids. This is how science works. You get more information. Pathogens pop up, and COVID is still surprising people. And unfortunately, the public is like, well, if you don't have the full story, we don't want to hear it, or we're not going to believe it. And the thing is, and that's why science, I understand that when we talk about belief in terms of science, that's not necessarily like, believing like a faith, but I do think that like this idea of like, we need to believe in science is also not the best way to put it, because I think science is not to be believed, but it's a more of a verb than a noun. You know what I mean? It's something that we need to constantly do and be, a part of and, engage with, because it is going to constantly change. Good science changes and evolves. Bad science stays still and will not take in, that's why even like in the field of biological anthropology, which studies human variation, the differences between humans, has been predominantly white dudes, right? And that's a problem, because you're going to get the same questions and the same answers. And this is why, the more diverse people you have asking questions about themselves, rather than people going to those places and being, I'm going to ask questions that are relevant to me rather than they're relevant to the people of that culture, and that's why I think you get better science when you're getting more diverse questions. You're going to get diverse methodology. You're going to get diverse answers, because the questions are just different, right? So I think, again, we're coming into a time where we're I don't know, there's a lot of change, and I think it's positive. Like, I don't know if this is too spicy for your listeners, but one of my favorite examples is just 13 months ago, a surgeon. He is a queer, gender-affirming peripheral nerve care surgeon out of the Pacific Northwest. Dr. Blair Peters finally counted all the nerve fibers on the human clitoris. Finally. The old number was 8,000, right? And the new number is 10,281 nerve fibers. It's ridiculously high, but it took that long for them to count. And I asked them, I was like, hey, how were you off 2,000 numbers? What's with that 8,000 number? And he said, they basically said that those studies were based on livestock studies. It wasn't even a human woman's clitoris. It was cows. Yes. It was a cow's clit. I know, but this is the thing. And so even like trans care is now leading to answering big questions that we should know about, because that will actually help, the science for people that have had genital mutilation and things of that sort, and to better understand it. Also for just, better care across the board for men and women and those that, and anything in between. So anyways, that's an example of why I think,
I totally
more
agree
getting
with
science and a broad idea. The more people doing it, the better.
No, I totally agree. I think it's important to bring that diversity. I've had scholars, because my specialty that I focus is biblical stuff, right? So you get a lot of the guys who've been writing for 200 years, pretty much in this long train. It's like a chain of tradition within critical scholarship, even that kind of think similar. And then you get some feminist scholars who come in, and then they point out something I've been reading my whole life, and I'm like, how did I not like pause and take that in? For example, the book of Revelation. I always like to bring this up because it's one of the more extreme New Testament apocalyptic texts. And in it, over and over, this author that we suppose is a guy named John on the island of Patmos keeps talking about Rome as a female and calls her the whore of Babylon. And that the way he's propagandistically speaking to whoever his audience may be, I imagine Jewish Christians, Christ followers, saying, do not prostitute with her. So like it's this locker room guy talk, kind of like, this is the whore of Babylon, meaning evil, wicked. Notice there's so much language in there. And I just used to read it, go, the whore of Babylon, and don't prostitute with her. And like, didn't stop, because there's a sensitivity to observing certain things, and it tells you about the culture and who the people are in a way that you don't really pause and think about. And then you have to ask yourself the questions of like, is this really divine? Like, would a person actually be speaking this way? What does this say about this person's perception of their God if they're thinking this way about humans? So there's all sorts of interesting avenues to explore deeper when someone wearing a different set of goggles brings them to the table. And so I'm with you, just to highlight that in my own field.
No, I mean, I just gave a talk, and I'm doing a science comedy special on February 16th at the Crow. But one of the big parts of the talk is talking about bonobos. So our closest genetic relatives are chimpanzees and bonobos. And we share a common ancestor with them 6 million years ago. And then and we went on our evolutionary trajectory, and they went on theirs. And then about 2 million years ago, 1 to 2 million years, with the formation of the Congo River system, they split. So chimpanzees are on one side of the river, bonobos on the other. And there's far more chimps than bonobos. Bonobos are only found in Democratic Republic of Congo, which has been pretty rife with a lot of sociopolitical warfare. So it's hard to study them in the country, but they have, right? But it's interesting because Dr. Amy Parrish is one of the world's leading experts in bonobos, and I interviewed her last year. And this is the deal. So chimpanzees and bonobos, we share 99% of our DNA with them. We are very closely related. And they are exceptionally closely related, and even more so. And bonobos used to be called pygmy chimpanzees. They look just like them, but they have very different ways of dealing with conflict. Now, I think we talked about this like during our first chat. Chimpanzees will deal with aggression or deal with conflict through aggression and violence oftentimes. Bonobos, though, have a different way of dealing with tension. Instead of fighting it out, they like to fork it out. And not just males and females. Females will do, GG rubbing with each other. Males will do sword fights, which the scientific term is penis fencing. And it's kind of a bit of a free for all, right? And it's not like every freaking second of the day, but this is just the way they deal with tension. And it's funny because, like I used to be on dating sites, and I would put down that I was a primatologist, and, more often than not, it was dudes that would be like, so you're a primatologist. Have you heard about bonobos? Which I knew what they were getting at. Right. Yeah. And I was like, that's awesome that you like that. And everybody kind of, anybody who knows about bonobos is like, I wish humans were like that. I wish we could just settle it with more amorous ways. But bonobos are actually, even though they're still patrilocal, meaning the males stay in the group, because usually when males stay on a group, when whoever stays in the group usually has better social bonds. Like, think about it. If you stay in your hometown with all your bros that you grew up with and you bro down with, though your broskies are going to have real tight bonds, and you might have punch ups and like form little coalitions and have little fights. But at the end of the day, you've spent a lot of time with them. The females don't. So they kind of have more, they don't have a cohesive bond that the males do. But with Bonobos, they're very unique. They actually, females do have a very cohesive bond. And not only that, they are female dominant. So the ladies run the show in bonobos. And it's really interesting because usually when a female comes to a new group, it can be really scary. Imagine going to a new school when you're in high school and you're like, I don't know who to sit with. But bonobo females, Amy Parrish had found, would go find the highest ranking female, the oldest, highest ranking female, the one that just running the show, and basically show her the best 2 weeks of her life. Right. And that is how she would solidify her spot in the group. But it's interesting when Amy Parrish did, published these results, which were very widespread across multiple zoos that had bonobos. It was seen in the wild, in the zoos, and captivity, so on and so forth. She was met with a lot of hostility, hostility. As you can imagine, a lot of male academics were not happy with this. And they, and even like recently when I posted about it, they're like, a guy said, well, no, it's co-dominant. Males are dominant too. But you should know that males, then there are dominant males in bonobos, but their ranking is dependent on the ranking of their mom. So imagine
mama wins.
Your mom, if your mom's high ranking, you are going to be pumped up the ladder. And not only that, but moms will play wing women to their sons. They'll try to get their sons laid by the highest ranking females that are not themselves. Right. So like the ladies who absolutely run the show. And my favorite was the response was, this is rather than female dominance, it is male deference. The males are letting the ladies think they're running the show.
So that's what some male scientists are pushing back, that are like, they're obviously not liking the way that the research is going. Yeah.
And it's hilarious because any other species or any other group, any other species that had similar, like look at any sort of male dominance, they don't go, oh no, it's female deference, and also, by the way, when they say male deference, some of these males were getting beat up by the females, and that's the thing, is there is violence, but not like gravely injured violence but with chimpanzees, they are insanely violent with each other.
They're
and will
eating each other and stuff.
Yes, that does happen. Yeah. And with bonobos, and my favorite the way she determined it, oh god, it's so funny. It's so like funny, but also like not funny. But like she found that, males were showing up with these injuries. Males in captivities would have these injuries, and she's like, they were like, why do they have these injuries? They're not housed with other males. Like, what's going on? And they realized it was the females, and it was females that were kind of keeping them, in line. If they would get attacked, if they would start getting physical with them, they would gang up and be like, no, we're not doing this. And so that's how they realized that it was the ladies that were actually kind of keeping the males in line. And then beyond that, females get first crack at the food, and the males will actually offer sex in exchange for food in some cases. Yeah. So you're seeing and these are our closest genetic relatives. Chimpanzees and bonobos are close, and bonobos are equidistant with us. So, but some argue that it's not dominance, or it's not a power structure, because there's no, they're not ruling with an iron fist. And my thought is maybe power is different.
Right.
In this case, like why power doesn't have, like there's,
we don't have to sit on an iron throne with a towering tower around and a scepter in our hand in order to have power. Right.
No, I mean, as a father, that sometimes just saying, I'm very disappointed in you, is far more cutting, or even just sitting quietly in the dark staring at your kid is far scarier than yelling or like, hitting, what I mean? Yeah.
Sometimes silence is like, whoa, dad's not, you know what I mean? So yeah, I can relate to that. It sucks that there's so much pushback and I just don't get it. I don't get it for me. But then again, I'm the kind of guy who wants to bring in new ideas, wants to test, limits, wants to explore and be open to various ideas that are not always ones we've always had. And that's why, like, I'll hear these things like Bigfoot, right? An idea that I never really took serious. Even when I was in my believing in all sorts of crazy stuff kind of phase in life, I didn't really take it that serious. Then there's Loch Ness, then there's Chupacabra, then there's, what we can list UFOs right now, and there's underground wars. You go and listen to certain people tell their testimony about with grays and greens underground, and dudes melted his hand off with his hand blaster, and like, I mean, the level of which there are various things out there, and I'm sitting there going, at some point you kind of draw a line, but some of this stuff's common sense to me. And what are we doing? Why are we fighting these ideas? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is I think that it is a loud minority. You know what I mean? Like that was really going up against Amy Parrish, and I think, and again, like science, that's what makes science so great is like, obviously we got new data, we look at it and kind of have to take that into consideration as well. So, but I also did I did a story about at an animal sanctuary I volunteer at, where there was a love triangle between 3 female monkeys, one initiating and going back and forth. But that also, I kind of dovetailed that into a new study that came out with macaques at Cayo Santiago, where they found that there might be an evolutionary benefit to them because there was a lot of male on male sex, and they found that those that did that had slightly more offspring because, if you butter the biscuits of the dude that's the alpha, they might let you have more access to females. So it's like, you're kind of like, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're getting your rocks off, but at the same time, you're going to also father more children. Right. And this is, So, I mean, and again, this is like early data coming out, but it's, and it's not a huge difference in kids, but it's not but point is, it's not hurting the amount of kids because it's the Darwinian paradox of like, homosexuality doesn't serve a purpose because it doesn't lead to more kids. Well, what if it does? What if it does? I mean, and that's where it's like, oh, okay.
So just one interesting point on that, because we're dealing with primates, and you're bringing up the fact that these factors that we find in our own societies today, which in our other interview, which will come out, it's edited, it's going to be edited and stuff, is that our morals, what we do and how we behave, this is not new, fam. No. Like there's primitive versions of this found in nature that precede us in the behavior of our ancestors or even our cousins, such as the chimpanzees, bonobos, etc. And one of those things is people will say the modern definition of homosexuality is like lifelong, always only attracted to same sex. And so I imagine there's that as well. But there are more fluid stances in nature in which they're kind of like, hey, I can get more females by doing this very thing. Possibly. And notice it's so taboo to even bring up. Some people already, I guarantee you, in the chat are going,
I already saw one that was like,
oh my God, this is so wrong.
You brought up gays, and I was like, I mean, honestly, like, let's be real. It's a big part of our life is, who we, because I look, and this is my mom and I, it's really funny. My mom is a scientist. I mean, technically she's a psychologist, she got her PhD in psychology. She's not a psychologist. She has her PhD in psychology, but she's a professor many, many years. And of course, it's hard to watch her daughter talk about sex and sexuality and do videos about the clitoris and even like not just counting the nerve fibers. There was I interviewed a scientist. She's amazing. Oh my God, one of my favorite interviews ever. That she works with death adders, the snakes, and found that they not only have 1 clitoris, they have 2 devil's doorbells. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Really cool stuff. But my mom's just like, oh God, because you don't want to see your kid talking about sex. But I'm like, because she always say it's not always about sex. And I'm like, well, in biology, Mom, it kind of is. Right. When it comes to, like survival of the fittest, which is also can be misconstrued in many different ways. Fitness generally means the ability to have kids. Like it's about passing down your genes, which, can happen in many different ways. But like we were just talking about the potential of being with other dudes could help other dudes get more ladies. But yeah, I mean, I would talk to my class, about, when it comes down to it, resources. When we talk about finding resources as animals and humans, resources are food and mates generally in the natural world, so I joke it's food and fucking, but it's like, finding food is very important. And for, males, they want to find mates, and females are very much, like in the natural world, often and I hate the word natural is not necessarily fair because we're part of the natural world, but in non-human animals, finding a mate can be really tough. And that's, a really interesting thing that we're going to see with climate change. And I don't know how your viewers feel about climate change. But I am a firm believer that it's happening. And, a lot of it is human caused, but we're seeing a lot of hybrids now because animals can't find mates. There's low availability of their mates. So there's a lot more hybrids. So like grizzly and, so they're called growler bears or pizzly bears. When, grizzly bears and polar bears get together, they'll have offspring, they'll mate. Wolves and coyotes will have coy wolves, so we're seeing this as a response to low resource availability. And by resource, I mean, they can't find mates. So, we're seeing sort of evolution in action, because of anthropogenic climate change.
Wow. There's so much to explore on this. I mean, it's interesting to watch reactions from people. You can tell in the audience are allergic to ideas. And like, I'll give you one example. Someone said up above that they want all the males to be gay or something like that. They want all men gay, schma. Like, you could see the reaction to some of this idea, pointing out how normal. So like, I guess, in your own words, because you're the one who's presenting this, it's important to point out you're not suggesting you want everyone to be gay. You're saying people are people and they're going to do things that they do. Why are we judging? Why is this a problem? I mean, notice the reaction that this is a signal that there is a problem, that you're bringing this up, right? That you're even talking about it. It offends certain people who have sensitivities, I imagine.
I struck a nerve. And I sincerely ask those that are upset, like, why did I strike a nerve when I'm literally talking about science, and I'm talking about science that's been done recently. Right. And we do know that a lot of things exist on a spectrum, sexuality, gender, sex, race. I mean, we know that race, there's no biological basis to racial classification. We're 99.9% the same across the human species. But when I strike a nerve, I know that, and I try to come at it with compassion as much as I can, even though it's frustrating sometimes, because I do identify as and somebody made a comment about my rainbow earrings earlier, and I was like,
I saw that.
Really, like
you're representing Noah. Come on.
Are you triggered by rainbow? I know exactly. But also you got to ask, like, who is the snowflake? And I hate that term, but like, who is the sensitive one? Like, I'm just talking, and if you want to be hyper, like, if you're very straight, that's fine. I don't care. Like, I'm just talking about the science that's being done. And also just because when things are not represented in the world, like, for instance, if what is on television or what's in the media is not representative of what is out there, imagine what it must be like to be a small child. And there's a lot of them, more than you think, that are probably struggling with thoughts of, either homosexual or bisexual thoughts that are like, I don't know what to do. And if they see that it's okay and it's accepted, that takes away a lot of shame. Even when I was a little girl, I didn't know that bisexual was even a thing. I thought you were I believed in the binary. Like, we were taught, and the binary is so kind of silly anyways. Like, nothing's just good, bad, black or white, there's always shades of gray. Right. But I didn't know that. And it wasn't until I was watching, and my mom doesn't remember this, but I, like, when you're a kid, you're like, I remember everything. And I was, cause it really, struck a nerve with me when I was watching George Michael's Freedom video, which, if you remember, 1990 Freedom, I'm a little bit older. So, like, essentially it's George Michael singing about coming out, but it's being lip synced by these gorgeous, like, OG supermodels. So it's like, I think it's like Christy Turlington, Linda Evangelista, Naomi Campbell, like the hottest of the hot early 90s supermodels, like gorgeous ladies. And I also thought George Michael was so hot. And I didn't realize it was a coming out anthem because, I was like 10, 11. And I'm listening to it and I'm dancing, and my mom comes in and I'm like, he is so hot. And she's like, he is bisexual. And I was like, and she didn't say it like, she was just kind of stating it. It wasn't like, there was no value to it. Like, she wasn't saying it was bad, but I was like, what the hell is bisexual? And it all kind of it was like, that those like gifts where you see like all the numbers and the, you're like, oh my God, I finally figured out the equation. Like, that's what I am, because I actually was really scared that I was gay and that it was going to ruin my life when I was like 8 years old. And all of a sudden it made sense that you can like both, and you're not going to go to hell. And there's no, because I grew up going to parochial school, and I had some religious teachers that were actually much more conservative than I was at a Presbyterian school. But point being, like, I think if you don't have that, and then same with, like, for instance, young like Black girls that are like seeing women kicking ass on television shows and realizing that like there's a place for them in these different worlds, whether it's STEM or arts, or when they're not seeing themselves represented, it leaves a mark. And so again, why does it upset you that we're just talking about something that might...
Can I cut you off for 1 second and just point out something? The chat, right? Few people you can tell are more conservative, and that's their prerogative. I don't tell them they can't be, but you can tell that the whole topic has completely triggered them to the point we should retitle the whole video. It should be, it's so a problem. And here's the thing, like, you discovered something about yourself. Me finding out that this is normal, that people do this. Some people are born with these particular attractions, with particular affinities. It doesn't change what I've always naturally, had an attraction to. But if I was hiding that I had something that was, socially taboo, don't bring it up. Change the topic. You woke person, things like that. Then I could imagine those people, that minority of people, who are just, I don't know, wired differently. I'll use the term wired differently, that they are not socially acceptable. You should shut your mouth. Why are you even going to bat for these people, is how it seems that pushback gets. And why is this relevant to Bigfoot? I think is an important point to bring back, is that we're dealing with primates. We're trying to just discuss whether or not this guy exists. This gets into superstitions and beliefs, and even the idea of, is this a primate that never went extinct, that we're seeing remnants of, that are just out of the peripheral view of our eyes, and we're just, it's out there, it's somewhere. And then how does that connect with primatology, anthropology, in humans? I think is an important discussion, which is why you went this direction. And I don't know, I'm going to bat for you a little bit here, just to point out that...
Well, I mean, Bigfoot is gay. I should point that out.
Please point it out. Like, piss them off. No.
No, I mean, it's so silly. Well, I mean, I think I saw somebody got upset, I think, when I brought up the clitoris thing, because they're like, of course they're bringing up gay, and I was like, well, I mean, but this is an example of why, representation matters, I mean, and that's also, even if we want to bring it back to Bigfoot, there were biological anthropologists that were getting involved in Bigfoot research because they believed, you know what I mean? And that also changes the field and kind of gives it a little bit more street cred, So, right. I mean, I don't know. I think that we're going to be looking for a new species of hominin, that's along the lines of a human. They probably deal with the same sort of struggles that we deal with, including sexuality and gender and all these sorts of things. You know what I mean? Like Bigfoot. Now I want to go back and write my pilot and make gay.
I think a lot of people have repressed feelings, and a lot of times they're saying one thing with their mouth, but who knows what their search engine looks like. I mean, honestly, this is how I felt about an interview I had the other day with a few presuppositionalists. They asked a question I'm not even going to say on my channel, just pure gross. It was the idea of like Epstein stuff. Would I do that to save my own family, right? And they're trying to get me into a moral pickle, right? Because we're dealing with morality. Where's it come from? They're trying to say it all comes from God, and that we should have. And I'm sitting here talking about subjective morality and how I personally imagine in a life or death, absolute survival of the fittest situation, how I would navigate these very not black and white, gray areas of morality and issues and things. But I thought, by their question, subconsciously, what are they looking at when no one's around, while they're mocking and scoffing or rejecting and literally, I mean, asking you, someone who's studied this stuff, especially since you're sensitive in the sense of recognizing social groups that are not the majority and that are oftentimes persecuted or even neglected, or, hey, shut them up. They have this agenda to make us realize that what they're doing is normal. How dare them try to make us binary, traditional views of life. How dare them let us know that they exist and that it's a normal thing in the world. To me, it's like, I just want to ask you, we've discovered that people are born like attracted to same sex. Like this is not like just a choice. This is an actual scientific thing.
And it can change. Yeah. I mean, well, a couple of things. I definitely think this is nothing new. That's one thing I want to drive home to anyone who has an issue. What we're talking about is nothing new, right? Like, I mean, come on. If it was good enough for the Greeks, good enough for the Romans. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, come on now. Let's talk promiscuous gay hordes. There's nothing new. And even, gender fluid is nothing new. It might be something that is new to you, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you have to accept it or love it, but at the same time, just like let people live. What we're seeing now too, because I've done a lot of shows recently about looking. So I'll put this out. In the world right now, at least 1,500 species have been documented engaging in homophobic, or my God, I'm butchering my own sentence. Sorry, there's a siren right out my door. So around the world, 1,500 species have been documented engaging in homosexual behavior, right? And those are just the ones we've seen. But only one species has been documented engaging in homophobic behavior. And I like to bring up the irony that species is in the genus Homo. But why is that, right? It's nothing new. We see it in animals all the time. If you have a dog, that if dick sniffing was an Olympic sport, they'd be bringing home gold every time. I mean, you take your dog to a dog park, they're constantly, doing the thing. But it's nothing new, right? And so that's okay if it upsets you, but just keep in mind that the discomfort that you might be feeling, just try to maybe think and I say this too I'm trying not to tread in too much into this territory, but with like white folks like myself that like have a hard time with talking about privilege and what that might mean, or speaking out against something like, I always say, like when it comes to, sexual harassment or abuse or even racist comments or even things that are like really just insensitive, like call it out. It shouldn't just be on the person that's feeling it. But even if it's uncomfortable for you, think for a second how uncomfortable that person that has been living that life or living that, in that stigma for all these years has been going through. So might as well pick up that burden and call it out in the moment. But also, when it comes to seeing representation of, different people, it's about time, because again, it's been there far longer than any of us have been on Earth. Right. And also right now, there's been Gallup polls about those that identify as part of the LGBTQIA community in different generations. And right now, so I think it's been doubling, right? Like I think Gen X, which I'm Gen X. I think Gen X is 5%. Millennials are about 10, but Gen Z is at 20%. And some could ask, are we getting queerer, or are people more comfortable being themselves?
It could be a factor of both, right? Like there could be both playing. But
I think a lot of it is, I mean, I think a lot of it is also just if you're no longer going to be stigmatized and ostracized for being who you are, right?
And some people might be exploring, like they don't know, and they're testing out, the waters, so to speak. So that might be something that's going on there. I appreciate what you said there, because I've taken some stances in the not too distant past with having someone on my channel that actually said some things and has a very, very staunch conservative view. And Constellation Pegasus in the chat actually brought it up earlier with Robert Price, which I've over and over, like, I'm going to just remove those comments if you're trying to promote this guy. And in Constellation, stay tuned, because I've been actually wondering whether or not I should make this video. But I have a video that I'm going to be putting out, and I'm going to share screenshots with you. And I hope that you can at least understand, as someone who's been sticking around this channel watching for a long time, I hope you can understand when I see people who actually are making racist memes and making racist comments toward Jews. Not just I sympathize for Palestinians in light of the war. I'm talking Jews are enemies of all mankind. And this is rolling out the red carpet for things like Nazism. When you see that, I hope when you watch that video, you'll second guess, or at least wonder why I'm so much a fan of this guy, Robert Price, and maybe understand Derek may have had an intuition and understood, hey, this was a line he needed to draw to get away. And I'm going to present that evidence for everybody to see for themselves who the new bedfellow he is now in bed with, using it's metaphor here, but the guy who's doing
that.
Yeah, like the guy he's doing videos with and the people who are jumping on board to attack me, you're going to see something about them. And I hope, as a good human being, someone who should see that what happened with the Holocaust, should see racism as a bad thing, would draw that line. But some people just don't give a shit. They let all flowers bloom, racism, anti-Semitism, as long as gays aren't allowed to be gay, or let's not talk about trans, or, these kind of things. Like, how far do you want to go with your conservatism to realize, like, some of these people who say they're not racist, birds of a feather flock together, and it continues to gravitate to them. So I'm going to show you guys some stuff here soon. Sorry we derailed to that, but I think it's important to emphasize that in light of the reactions to the fact that you're bringing up what is so common in nature, including our own species, species in the term of just saying Homo sapiens. So, like, anyway, how does this relate to Bigfoot in your estimation?
Well, again, like I mentioned, I think having more diverse and inclusive voices asking questions, especially this made me laugh. I found my old Bigfoot bounty sheet of breaking down all the teams, and most of them, let's be real, they were white. Most of them were all white, but there was a team. It was a father-son. They were awesome, and I remember when I got the sheet, they had nicknames for each of the team, like the Southern Squatchers, the Southern, the Bigfoot Does or whatever. Like, they had just all these different cute names. And when I got to the black team, they were called Team Chocolate, and I lost my shit. I was like, nope, I'm not okay with it, until I found out that was actually a family name. Because I was like, no, I do not feel comfortable about this. How dare you? And it ended up being like, I was like, I feel a lot better. But, we did have an indigenous team. They were called the Green Giants because their last name is Green, and they're two massive, 6'5" dudes. And, and getting their diverse take on Bigfoot, because they were indigenous. So they came in and they had their own version of what Sasquatch was. They would burn sweetgrass to attract Bigfoot. I like to think it was weed, because that when we would all have benefited. Although we did, by the way, we shot the show in Glenwood, Washington for a big chunk of it, Northern California, and then near Mount St. Helens. But when we were in NorCal, I was really afraid that we were going to stumble on some pot farms and someone would get shot. But anyways, why does it matter? I don't know. I think because, we're talking about Bigfoot's behavior, I don't know, is what's Bigfoot's reproductive strategy? Is he like a macaque and getting down with other dudes? That's not all macaques are doing that. That was just one study, but again, sexuality is part of behavior, right?
I gotta help just add to the icing on the cake that you're laying out here. In our last interview, and people will see that, we go into a long morality kind of question and ordeal. And I think this topic, it gets into that vein of morality and what we should or shouldn't do, how should we behave, and what is normal, is it harming, that kind of stuff. And that's why I think this is relevant, because when we're hunting this phantom figure we call Bigfoot, whether it be Yeti or whatever, in a way, it's this monstrous thing, and in some cases benevolent, just like other humans. We have monstrous humans, and then we have benevolent humans. And it's a reflection of ourselves, I think, in many ways. There's a mystery to it, a constant hide-and-go-seek battle of trying to find this creature. And you're using science and tools and understanding the various groups within the primates to try and do your best to still man their position, but also explore, is there some creature out there we call Bigfoot? And in order to do so, there's diet, there's sexuality, there's how these groups behave and act. And I think that because we've had taboos in our society, because of religion in our particular political models or whatever it might be, these are not comfortable topics for some, or they just don't like it because they themselves aren't in those categories in some way, shape, or form. So I think empathizing is the key when we're exploring these topics. Having an open mind, you don't have to be the things you're open-minded and seeing other humans have. It comes back to one thing, just making this point, and then you feel free to take it wherever you want. When I got clean and sober off of opiates and alcohol, my first initial reaction early on was to say, alcohol is bad. Opiates are bad. Like, everyone should stop doing these things because of what they did to me.
Yeah.
And then you grow up a little, you mature, you get some time under your belt, and you realize, man, these people know how to drink like normal individuals. And by the way, that amputee over there, if it weren't for opioids, that person who's dying of cancer, if it weren't for opioids. And so you start to realize it's not black or white. There's a gray area, and sometimes it's bad and sometimes it's good, depending on the circumstance. That philosophy, that rule of thumb, I apply in everything. And so I think in this case, you should also try to mature with it at least.
Yeah. And I like I said, I think when we first met, I really commend you because I grew up, I know a lot of people who did not survive that. So, I mean, I'm just very grateful that you were able to. And I get it. Like when I lost my best friend to heroin overdose, and I hated, I remember I had a good friend that was dating a drug dealer at the time that it happened. And I was so mad. I just thought everything was, I just saw it very black and white that drugs were bad. You know what I mean? It was the same time South Park was big too. So it was just like, drugs are bad. And, but now I see it very differently. And I honestly, I'm all about the legalization and education around drugs. I did John Fugelsang's show last night. He has a Sirius XM show. We ended up getting into like a riff or a rant about how like drugs should be legal. All drugs should be legal to everyone 75 and up. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like grandma should be able to slam heroin if she wants, right? She's earned it, but like, no, I think education, teaching people how to responsibly imbibe. And if they can't, they can't. Like, I don't drink, and there's a good reason why I don't, Right. So it's like, but I also I would never in a million years be like, no, if I know I can't be around it, which I don't feel that way, but right. I know people who do feel that way, then that's their prerogative to not be around it. But I would never impose that on anyone. Like I go to Burning Man, and I've done that. My first time doing it without drinking was really hard, but I was cool. It's fine. Yeah. But, again,
applying that because I have a very close experience with that to all these other issues. And what blows my mind is how normal those things are in every other society but ours.
Yeah.
God forbid we start talking about those things, So it's like really, really strange when we're trying to be scientific minded. And often the viewers that watch my channel in all other areas typically are scientifically, thinkers on these things, but then it gets real sensitive and becomes bad when we start to open up this topic. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry if I'm not here I didn't come on here to, and like, again, like when you were like, what does it have to do with Bigfoot? And I kind of thought about it. I was like, well, it doesn't necessarily have to do, like we just kind of went down a rabbit hole, but I'm just surprised that it would upset folks that much. I thought, I also realize, and I'm probably going to get dragged for this one. I live in Los Angeles.
Well, yeah.
So someone actually said last night on one of the comments from doing last night's show, like, I hope the Hollywood filth is swallowed by an earthquake soon. And which is funny because today is the 30th anniversary of the Northridge earthquake, where I grew up in Northridge. So,
wow.
We slept on the front lawn for a week after that. But like, I'm used to being called, like all sorts of things for being in California, or even when I lived in New York, but I forget that there are parts of the US, even, here in California, for sure, there's a lot of conservative spots that people still have a hard time talking about these, I guess, controversial subjects that are really life subjects,
Yeah. I think it's, I don't know. I love talking about them. And Bigfoot, I had to have you on for that because you've done the show. You were involved in the show. You are, you're a skeptic, of course, but you're also willing to take any evidence that may come forward. I just think there's so much overlap when I talk to you about it, to belief systems and claims of UFO abductions. And I saw Jesus and Elvis appeared to these women, and you know what I mean? Like, Tupac's still alive. And like, you know what I mean? Like, God. Yeah. But
that pilot that I wrote, Tupac is in it. Anyways.
Well, you have a tour coming up for those who do. Please tell us.
Yeah, I don't think it's on there, but if you Google Trova trip, I mean, you can find it on Instagram, but in my bio, if you go to Trova trip, Natalia Reagan, you'll see I have a trip to Madagascar that I'm hosting in May 29th through June 6th. If you guys love lemurs, there's lots of basically, if you're familiar with iNaturalist, I think the iNaturalist page for one of the parks we're going to is 24 pages long. They have so much endemic flora and fauna. This particular park, Ranamafana, has over 12 species of lemur. One of the world's leading lemur experts, Dr. Pat Wright, will be there while we're there. And essentially, it's 9 days, 4 different cities, but multiple parks, seeing lemurs, doing a night hike so we can catch the nocturnal eye and mouse lemur. Fun note about the mouse lemur, they're a highly promiscuous species. And so during mating season, the males, their testicles will swell very large. Fun side note. I don't know if we're going to be there during mating season, but maybe that'll help us find them. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool opportunity to see wildlife there. Lots of chameleons too, if you're familiar with, if you're into herping, which is of course herpetology. Yeah, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So the trip is, like I said, 9 days, May 29th through June 6th. And I'll be hosting it. They'll have guides on the ground, but I'm doing one actually to the Galapagos first, and I'll be shooting a lot of that. So you'll get to see how fun it is to travel with an animal expert comedian. Don't worry, I won't just be talking about gay animals. Although if you see some gay lemurs, I'm going to point it out. But for the most part, it's just going to be talking. I just dork out over lemurs. Like I'll talk to you your ears off about their vertical clinging and leaping and all their different vocalizations and stuff. It's going to be really fun.
Well, I hope that people who are interested in something like that go explore it. I think I have the link in the description. I think you gave it to me before. Let me double check here. So. You have the website. No, you haven't. So if you send it to me, I'll add it into the description.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Yeah, go ahead and do that now, please.
I'm gonna, I'll pull it up. But yeah, it's gonna be a lot. Like I said, I'm really, really, really excited. And if you guys are interested, if you're in Los Angeles, and I'm doing a show called Survival of the Filthiest, about basically it's kind of a hilarious, salacious science show about sex and reproduction. So I'm going to be talking about, the evolution of sex and the evolution of boobs and butts. And we're going to talk about ancient DNA and whether or not we got down with Neanderthals. There's going to be a lot of that we will talk about bonobos. So if you're not cool with the queer animals, maybe not the show for you, but that's kind of the stuff we'll be talking about. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I hate bonobos now.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's really funny because people have a very intense reaction to bonobos. Like I said, I like men and women, and I would be on dating sites and dudes would just be like, hey, I see you're a primatologist. Have you heard of bonobos? Which is like asking a gynecologist, oh, have you heard of a vagine? It's like, of course I know what a bonobo is, but I also know what you mean. And again, some people think they're great. Some people are a little overwhelmed by it. And I understand, it's a lot of stooping.
I'm putting join her tour and then there's the link.
Come to Madagascar. It's going to be a lot. I mean, the people that have signed up so far, we have a bee expert. I'm not even kidding. This woman is the most phenomenal bee and native California bees too. So she's like the most badass bee lady. So, and then we have I have some good friends from Germany that are coming that are hilarious and amazing. And it's going to be a good group. So I hope you can make it. And also, oh, by the way, I have coupons. So if you're really interested, just message me. You can DM me. So you can either comment on the don't comment. Well, maybe you can if you are really
message on Twitter.
You can message me on Twitter. I'm just trying. I want to make sure that I see it. I'll make sure I check my things. And if you message me, I do check my requests on my messages. So if you message me on Instagram, I have $50 and $100 coupons. Ooh. And right now it's the early bird rate. So it's $26.75 for 9 days, which is pretty darn good to go clear across the world. You do have to buy your flight because, I don't know where you're coming from. But and it goes up after, I think I have 3 more early bird spots left and it'll go up like $100. So but I have coupons. Who doesn't love coupons?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm going to check your YouTube at this point. I want to give people just a second to go ahead and hit
Yeah,
that
if you want to
subscribe
follow
button.
me. I do talk about gay animals sometimes, so please don't hate on me. I mean, you can hate. I mean, I've got thick skin. I'm from
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
But I will
I
be
just
one of
figure I'd address that, that's
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, I am so Peter has been in the chat. Peter's amazing of gonna go for it. Herding cats. I did his show last week and he's helping me kind of set up my live streaming stuff because I plan on live, and I'll have you on, Derek, to talk on when I start live streaming because that's something that I've hosted podcasts, for Neil deGrasse Tyson and myself and other folks in Discovery. So I think live streaming is kind of the way to go to have good conversation, but also, connect with people that have questions, especially since the next one I think I'm going to do Beth Pratt, who is, if you know anything about P22, our mountain lion here in Los Angeles, who unfortunately passed away December of 2022. Beth Pratt was the biggest champion for this damn cougar. And we're both cougars. I'm over 40. She's over 40. So we joke about we need to do a 2 cougars podcast. But we're going to do a little talky talk. And she does a lot of, she actually is leading the charge in getting the world's largest wildlife crossing off the ground here in California, just north of Los Angeles over the 101 freeway. Essentially, oh, hi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, so they're basically connecting 2 big chunks of land where a lot of mountain lions cross and end up getting killed. In fact, oh my God, this broke my heart. We had one bear in the Santa Monica Mountains, one bear named BB12, and they caught footage of him walking on the beach in Malibu. Like this was like talk about Boo Boo the bear. He was like the Boo Bear and the Boo, and he unfortunately tried to cross the freeway and got hit. So they're creating this giant wildlife crossing to hopefully, and it's really fascinating too. I've become friends with the architect. His name is Robert Rock, which is perfect if you're an architect. But he, all the things that have to go into creating a wildlife crossing that is inviting to animals. Like you have to make sure that the light pollution is not too bad. You got to make sure the sound, they have like these really great ways of cutting down the freeway sound. So it lures the animals to come across the bridge. Really cool.
So I need to update everybody, letting them see if we've got new subscribers to your channel.
Yeah.
You have 2.24K. You're going to be doing live streams. We're looking forward to hanging out with you and learning more from you. Let's hit the refresh button and see if we've done at least 2.25 or 2.26. Let's see. Let me refresh this thing. 2.28. Okay.
Ooh, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's like 40 or so subscribers just so far. You'll get more trickling in.
That's huge. Thank you.
And someone brought up an interesting comment up here in the chat. Brian Stevens, actually. Thank you for commenting that. So for those who didn't like the title, which we spoke, I think, 45 minutes, pretty much nothing but Bigfoot, Yeti, and all this, and going into primatology. And so I say Yeti for some big science, Bigfoot, and much more. So the context of much more is there. Amen. So I'm just saying, like,
I mean, if anyone has any questions, I mean, like I did a whole hour-long talk at TAM about Bigfoot. So like, I have a whole, we could go through all the different vocalizations or the diet and the dentition of Bigfoot. I'm down, it just, I kind of went where we meandered where it went. Right. Yeah. So, like I said, I could talk about, in like environmental DNA. One of the things that I would say is, with something that's really cool and unique about non-human primates, is that teeth, for instance, are very much not an indicator of what they eat. Their canines, at least, is as much as it is for like fighting with for access to ladies. Like for instance, like gorilla males have very large canines compared to females. I mean, the females have substantial canines, but it's because they're trying. It's like male competition rather than, oh, I'm going to go eat a deer right now, because gorillas, FYI, are primarily vegetarian. They love to eat bamboo. They love their bamboo. And so they actually have, molars. A lot of times it's the chewing. And that's also because, they got that sagittal crest, which helps them grind and chew things. Where is that species? Paranthropus boisei. This is my favorite hominin right here. This Paranthropus boisei, discovered by Mary Leakey, was called Zinjanthropus. This is part of the Paranthropus genus. There's only right now 3 species in Paranthropus. It's thought to be a dead end genus because it's not part of our Homo lineage. They were contemporaries with Homo habilis, but they were not part of the Homo genus. But cool thing about Paranthropus boisei are all they're called, by the way, robust hominins, because look at these big ass cheekbones. These are called zygomatics. And usually, they're basically their big ass cheekbones. And like I said, with gorillas, they have big grinding teeth. So you can see this is a 3D print, so it's not the best, and I'm not always the best at mirroring my thing. There we go. Teeth. Yeah, you can see how big those teeth are. I don't have a human. Well, I don't have a. No, there's. Well, here. This is a. No, this is Homo. Well, this is Homo habilis. So these two lived at the same time. I'm not very good at this. Okay. I know. I'm like, I used to teach on Zoom. So Homo habilis and Homo or Paranthropus boisei, but they, you can see kind of the canine, or sorry, the molar size is big, stark difference. Paranthropus has big ass molars, and that's because they were eating hard to grind food. At first, they were named Nutcracker Man because they thought they were cracking nuts, but most likely it looks like it was grasses and sedges. Imagine chewing on kind of like dry grasses. You got to really grind to get it, and so that's where a sagittal crest would come in handy. And did this get a little nipped? Oh no, this was my Valentine's Day present last year, guys. My boyfriend took 4 days to 3D print this, but then the muscles would go up through those zygomatics and attach here, and it would help them chew up food. But like, so with Bigfoot, for instance, when I would ask people like, what does Bigfoot eat? Because I'm sincerely asking, what do you think Bigfoot ate? And they're like, well, does it have a diet more like a human, like an omnivore, right? Where we actually have pretty measly canines because we don't have a lot of male-male competition for females. But we also have smaller molars because we eat a lot of more processed foods, cooked foods, and things like that. Whereas, like gorillas and chimps, they're not using fire, right? So they're eating harder to grind food. So like things like that really do help them kind of better come up with their theories or amend their theories, looking at diet and teeth. And like I did a video. So one thing I didn't mention is when I did Bigfoot Bounty, we had great science on the show. We had a mobile DNA lab. We were using environmental DNA. We were looking at camera traps. We had people set up camera traps to see, these are tactics that conservation scientists use now. Like putting up camera traps to basically see cryptic animals that do not like, they're not habituated to humans. They don't want to be around humans. You can catch, like, for instance, P22, our mountain lion. The very first image of P22 was a camera trap. Miguel, oh my God, I'm blanking on his last name. He's wonderful. He's at the Natural History Museum here in Los Angeles. He caught this image of a cougar booty. He was like, that is a cat butt, and that is not a house cat. Holy crap. Because you have to remember, P22 came all the way from the Santa Monica Mountains, crossed 2 freeways, the 405 and the 101. If you're familiar with Los Angeles, you know the gravity of that, to make it to Griffith Observatory, and had a little tiny home range of 9 square miles to live. But anyways, point being, we used all these really cool things on Bigfoot Bounty. We used darting and collaring. We used, what else? They did a lot of cool. I mean, like, again, like the biting insects and getting the DNA from that was phenomenal. But we knew that it was not going to get a fair shake on the show because it was a Spike TV.
Yeah.
They were actually kind of hoping there would be more human drama because all the contestants on the show got along. Right. They all liked each other. So I remember one night they gave them alcohol and they were like, "Come on, guys, fight!" And they were like, "What?" Like, they all were cool, right? We all were cool. We all loved it. I'm still friends, like I said, with most of them. Yeah, my point is, we knew that science was not going to get a fair shake. So I produced a series called Talking Shit with Dr. Todd and Natalia on YouTube. And that was I started on YouTube in 2005 or 6, but making videos of me and my rabbit, like I didn't do it to do anything, like this. Right. So I think Talking Shit, if you go in videos, there might be like a lot of these are old as hell. Oh yeah, this was a pitch video to get a bigger budget because we'd been doing it for a few years on my tiny little budget. But we covered things like camera traps, getting DNA from a turd and what can poop tell you. Like, basically, I would joke that stool is the perfect tool because stool, when you get a stool sample, you got to collect it properly. By the way, like, remember when we were talking about how nobody won the 10 million, right? Because nobody found Bigfoot. But someone did win 100,000, right? Because they were the last person standing, the last team standing. And that was because they got along, because I think the other team they were going up against were fighting the whole finale and were like, come on, guys. But it was also about collecting the biomaterials properly to make sure, like we taught them how you put on the gloves, you use a tongue to pick it up, put it in your little Ziploc baggie and whatever. So that kind of stuff. But yeah, I did the talking shit show to kind of really teach like locomotion, like the different, because that was another thing. People would come in and be like, Bigfoot can walk on 2 legs, but they could also get on all 4s and run really fast. And I was like, and then I'd have to explain that with locomotion, it's usually one or the other. You can't do both great, right? Like even okay, for instance, bonobos. Again, we talked about our closest genetic relatives and how salacious they can be, but they're also more gracile built than chimpanzees. So they're a lot slimmer, and they have longer hind limbs than they do forelimbs, or they have longer hind limbs than chimpanzees. So they walk on 2 legs more often than chimps do, and it's very eerie and human-like, but they're not habitual bipeds, right? They're not constantly doing it generally. And so they're much better, on all 4s than they are on 2 legs. And so usually you kind of have to pick one. Just like if you got on all 4s right now and we're like, I'm going to be a quadruped today, you probably could do it for like 2 minutes and you're like, this is dumb. I hate my life. I don't want to do this anymore. You're not going to be efficient. You're not going to be effective. You're going to everything's going to take forever, right? So it really doesn't work like we're going to just do one thing and then the next. Same with like Bigfoot and diet. Like, what does Bigfoot eat? Is Bigfoot, sometimes they're like, he's a carnivore. And I'm like, well, okay, then that would affect a lot of things. Carnivores have very short digestive tracts. They'd have different teeth, and then if he was, the only technical carnivore, we call them faunivores in the primate world. If you want to pull up a tarsier, you can. I wonder because you'll laugh if you see what a tarsier looks like, and you're like, this is like pretty much our only carnivore in our primate world.
How do you spell it?
Tarsier, and they basically eat bugs. They basically.
Okay, I'm gonna make you. Well, here, I'm gonna use the restroom real quick, and if you want to talk about this, I'm gonna bring the image up if that's cool.
Sure.
Do this.
I'll talk. Yeah. Hi. Hello. Oh God. Here we have the tarsier. Tarsiers are hilarious because they're the ones with the big eyes. They've got eyes almost as like their eyes are basically their eye sockets are bigger than their brains. Imagine it's like, your stomach's bigger than your eyes are bigger than your stomach. They've got eyes bigger than their brains, but they love to eat insects. And that's what makes them, they're called faunivores. So they're little bug eaters. And a lot of primates are opportunistic hunters. Even humans, are omnivores, but eating meat every day is a fairly recent thing, only because of just availability, right? Like if hunter and gatherers weren't guaranteed to find, or hunt or find something every day. So, it's a mixture between gathering and hunting. And oftentimes gathering would bring in more calories just because it was a guaranteed thing. But once you had things like, access and being able to harness, use fire for cooking, that opened up a whole new, you can eat root vegetables because eating a raw potato just sounds terrible. So, I like, why is the bald eagle bald? Technically not bald, just got a white head, just a big old white head. Let's see. I'm going to see if we have any questions. But yeah, tarsiers are fascinating. They're also in a funny spot when it comes to primates. So you've got monkeys, you got apes, you got lemurs, which are called strepsirrhines. They're kind of in this like weird little kind of off branch over here. And strepsirrhines, the lemurs you only find in Madagascar. You got lemurs and lorises. And then with tarsiers, they're kind of in this weird, I'm going to use liminal correctly finally. They're in this weird liminal spot where they're not monkeys and apes, but they're not lemurs and lorises. So in this like little funny spot. But yeah, they are the big carnivorous primates. But even though they're not that big, they're kind of smallish. And a lot of them are nocturnal. That's why they have those big eyes.
That's awesome. I know our eyes obviously aren't nocturnal, but we adjust to that. I imagine that's common in eyes. Someone asked a question. What is the verdict on Bigfoot? Does he not exist, or does he exist in your estimation?
Wait, say that again. What is the version
Does
on
he
Bigfoot?
exist or not?
I can't, like, again, I would say the probability is directly adjacent to 0. I mean, that is my diplomatic way of saying highly improbable.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, like, again, I would love to be proved wrong. And then there's this amazing hot Yeti named, like Steven that's just walking the Himalayas. Like, I would love that. That personally, I think it's a very wonderful notion.
It'd be really cool to discover, like, here's this hominid creature still around, like, I would love to find that. And then we didn't think these people were just seeing things all along, or even potentially all creating the idea. But I do, because this is my problem, is I've seen how often humans, I'll use the term superstitious, have like invented, created, or come up with, I'll just say, wild things to believe in that I'm highly suspicious to begin with. However, if I were comparing like Bigfoot to, and this is just my opinion based on what I've looked at, like UFOs abducting people in their greens and grays and stuff, I'd say Bigfoot's more likely. But then again, I'm not saying there isn't life out there in the universe. It's just kind of odd that they can galactically travel the universe and they crash land. Yeah, there's all sorts of
argument to be like, oh, well, we haven't found I mean, not finding a body is not totally crazy, because if they live in the Pacific Northwest, which is like, becoming a fossil or staying in the same place when you die is super rare if you're out in the middle of nowhere, because things scavenge and your bones are scattered to the wind, right? But it's convenient to be like, well, because he's an interdimensional being, okay.
Yeah, that's that happens. I've seen that in the chat even. And I don't think they were there early in the episode when I kind of brought that up. I think it's convenient God and Bigfoot both get to be unfalsifiable interdimensional beings who don't that you can't find. But I just thought about that. I was like, I'm already cautious. I'm already biased toward it not being the case, because humans make up stuff so much, and we have so many folk tales and legends and myths that we invent, stories, that it's hard for me to even, unless we found it. Now, if we found it, I'd be like, damn, okay, actually there's something there, but it would be some form of a primate, and it wouldn't be ridiculous. It wouldn't be one of these, in my opinion. How they have the Carl Sagan, the well-known saying that says, like, the evidence needs to match the claim. And that's what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, even saying like it's a theory is giving it too much weight, because usually a theory is built on years and years and years of scientific, gathering of, like gravity, the theory of, that's a good, we pretty much know it exists, but like, it's still theory. But me falling on the ground says it exists all the time, because I'm a klutzy klutz. But I again, the reason why I've always, again, I entertain it, because I find it fascinating, deeply, always have. I would, there's again a romance to it. Like, I do think it's it's a really great opportunity to talk about these things from multiple angles, like from more of a, spiritual angle, from a scientific angle, from a, a history angle, from a, oral tradition angle. I think that kind of encompasses, we got to cover so much today, even though some of it was, going down different paths. I think it still kind of came back to, Bigfoot is a great unifier in a funny way, because there's people that have opinions. I think at one point, I can't remember, but it was like more people believed in Bigfoot than the theory of evolution. It was something pretty terrifying. But at the same time, I was just like, oh man, like, at least I can have some conversation with them. There's, I could talk about, I feel like I could talk about anything with anyone then at that point.
Yeah, you're pretty ecumenical. I'll use it. Like, you're really good at being able to dialogue with people who might have wild ideas, and I can too. I can have these conversations, but I'm not going to say I don't think, like, oh my gosh, how do we, like, so the other day, this is the perfect time to do this, I guess, because I haven't done this yet with my channel. I came across Facebook, and there was this image. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'll share that image so people.
I saw Carrie's comment. Thanks, Carrie Ann.
So this image right here, I told my brother and my brother-in-law are extremely UFO like fanatics, right?
Oh, okay.
And so I told him, I was like, listen, I was on my way home. Ryan, my wife, my partner, she took a picture of this object that followed us all the way home in the sky. And we weren't sure what the hell it was. I thought maybe it's a weather balloon or something from China. Like I started throwing these things out to them. I gave them a narrative before I gave them the answer. And they're like, you're bullshitting me, man. Quit playing games, bro. I know you're joking with them. I'm like, no. I really don't know if this is like, it's an unidentified object that followed us home. And I don't know what this is. And they're like scratching their heads going, what the hell is this? I mean, I've never seen any UFOs. Like I've seen the cigar shaped ones. I've seen this and that. Man, I told you, you're too skeptical, they said. So we went to Texas Roadhouse the other night over here, right? And I said, all right, now's the perfect time for me to lay out something that I've been hiding for 48 hours and letting you think, because I wanted you to understand why I'm so skeptical. And he's like, it was bullshit, wasn't it? And I'm like, let me explain. I told you this object in the sky is following me home. I gave you a narrative a little bit. I already misled you. Okay. But I'm telling you this, and I think this applies to religion I think this can apply to almost any claim that humans will start building a narrative, even because our perceptions are easily deceived. So I said, look, man, not once when I sent you this, did you look at it and just go, a bird shit on your windshield?
Yeah.
Like not once did you just go, common sense, most basic. I called it a spy balloon, possibly. I called it like a UFO follow me home. Yeah. I don't know what this is. Someone might have thought it was an angel. It's bird poop.
Oh my fucking God.
I played this on him and he goes, let me look at it again. I'm like, dude, the most common sense basic position is here's bird poop on my windshield. It wasn't even my windshield. I took the image from some other Facebook. And I just made it a lesson to him to say, you say I'm too skeptical. I say you're not using critical thinking skills enough when you're approaching these claims. You're not like, could it be something? Yeah, but
like, did he not zoom in? Because I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I would have zoomed in, and I'm so skeptical of things. People send me stuff all the time where I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that's it's so great.
I think that would cross your mind.
Oh my God. I took a picture recently too where I was at the Google building in New York. Well, it wasn't that long. It was actually pre-COVID now that I think about it. But I was in the commissary. It's like as you can imagine, Google in New York is like so much free food everywhere. It was so cool. That's to me, like as somebody my inner fat kid was like, yes, I want to work here. But I love me some free food. But I was sitting in the commissary and I looked at it. It was a beautiful vista of, I think you could see the Empire State, and it was just gorgeous. And I remember there was a reflection in the window that looked very much like a UFO. And of course I took a picture of it and I was like, oh my God, they're there. Something like I just made some joke about like they're out there, and everybody was like, holy shit, what is that? I'm like, it's just the reflection of it was like the chandelier and the wind, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh my God, it kind of, people will see what they want to see. It's, same with so much out there, again, if you kind of feed them a little bit of the narrative, like this is exactly why when Coyote Peterson posted that dumb video about look at this non-human primate that I found in the Pacific North, this new non-human primate that I found in the Pacific Northwest, because again, he didn't say it was Bigfoot. He didn't say that, but you knew what he was, and then of course, and then I got attacked big time, by like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And how could he know? And I was like, he knew what he was doing. He knew what and anybody with any primate, because he calls himself an animal expert. And I was like, of course he knew what he was doing. Right. But also, if you call yourself an animal expert, you're not, you don't know what a gorilla skull looks like, maybe rethink the things. Not that you have to know every skull out there. There's certain, like, I'm not going to know everything either, but like,
I do. So, and I think your point is like, there's our mind, it's like people who do this know that we're going to connect dots that aren't there necessarily. That's why I fed them a lie up front saying this is what this is, because he was like mocking my skepticism. You're too skeptical, man. We're going to time travel and we're going to be able to do this and that. And I'm like, I don't believe it till I see it kind of person, right? At this point, like I need better data is my point. It's not necessarily just seeing it, but I'm saying I'm way more cautious about things that aren't normal, everyday things happening like that. And so he jabbed at me and I did that. The other thing I thought about was this is in the whole beliefs thing. In antiquity, in the Greek world, they had a lot of narratives, a lot of stories about gods and humans that had turned into gods, their bodies going missing. So it's a very well-known trope in the Greek and Roman world that human mortal people that went missing became a god. And this is like ubiquitous in the Greek and Roman world. I mean, if you were to become a god, your physical body needed to not be here anymore. So you were teleported or transported to Mount Olympus, to heaven. And it was such a theme within the mythos of Greece and Rome that people in real life, I imagine, tried to imitate having the bodies go missing. Alexander the Great, they say there's a narrative where Alexander the Great tries to drown himself into a river so the river would take him off, and then people can't find his body. Well, what's that mean? He's become a god. Yeah. And so the question comes to Jesus. Did the disciples steal his body because they wanted to make it to where he became a god? Or is this part of the... We don't know whether or not that's the case, or if it's just the myth of the well-established trope in narratives that people's bodies go missing. It's just the point of that's how I would think today versus, well, he really did. He really did transform into the celestial being and stuff. You know what I mean?
Did you watch The Leftovers?
What's that?
It was a show that was it on Showtime? Justin Theroux is in it. It's essentially kind of like it's so funny. I need to watch it. I would like to kind of go back and watch it again. I watched it in 2018, but it's basically a bunch of people just disappear. And it's kind of a revelation type story about like, was this the rapture? And then the people that left, were they the chosen ones, and were the ones left in the, liminal state of hell?
Right.
Sort of limbo purgatory, and it's a really interesting idea, but I would wonder your take on it.
I haven't seen it. You and me have to talk again, and I'm going to
I know.
Yeah. So we've gone 2 hours.
We have.
We've been all over the place. People, please subscribe to her YouTube. If you want to go on tour with her, it's in the description. Instagram, Twitter, follow her, message her, and she's got coupons. So don't forget.
I got coupons. Mama's got coupons.
Got the coupons.
Also, Peter asked about my dog. I can go grab her. Do people want to see my pug?
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll close out with that.
I'll see if my legs still work. Oh.
I hope everybody's enjoyed the discussion. We mainly focused on Bigfoot, and then we wandered off into different conversations. And so we're back, I guess, to the end, wrapping this up. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Subscribe to her channel. And all right. Oh, let me make you full screen. Oh, yeah.
This is Raisin. We think she's a dog. We're not 100% sure. She could be a walrus or a squirrel in a ferret costume. Say hi, Raisin. I just woke her from slumber. She's most annoyed. Raisin, say hi to everyone. She's also boneless. She has no bones. She's a gelatinous sack. Look, oh God, gelatinous sack of beans and sand. Oh my God. Can you believe this was once a wolf? What the hell happened? And oh God, if you guys ever want to be totally freaked out, Google pug skull. Yeah, Raisin, it's absolutely terrible what lies underneath your flesh. Pug skulls are terrifying.
Really?
Yeah, I know. She's a rescue, so I don't like when dogs don't have noses because it's not nice to them. They can't fully. You hear her breathing her snoring, rivals my partner. She's wow. Oh, but anyways, yes, there you go, Peter. I know he was like, "Where's Raisin?" I'm like, "This is." See, look at this sack of beans and her soft belly and her 10 nipples. She's. Tell her to calm her 10 titties. But
I
yeah,
really appreciate you and the pug joining us today. Seriously, this was really fun. I want to do more. We can definitely go and dive into various other topics. And let me know if anyone signs up. It makes me feel good to know that I'm helping the community and people.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and to folks, I think someone said, like, someone said something like, oh, she says Bigfoot was gay. I don't think I have to preface this or explain, but that was a joke.
I took you serious. I'm sorry.
Bigfoot, I would like Bigfoot to be a big lesbian, personally. That would make my life so happy. Oh my God.
Well,
my name is Marge. I've been hiding from humanity for 300,000 years in the Pacific Northwest. Came over on the Bering Strait. Yeah, that would.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good one.